Did you know elephants, these majestic, gentle giants, were once used as executioners in history? Yes, it's true. These animals have had a varied and fascinating relationship with humankind throughout the centuries. Their roles have ranged from revered creatures in religious traditions to formidable forces in warfare and construction projects. Picture this. In the dream that foretold Buddha's mother's pregnancy, a white elephant was the star. Fast forward a few centuries to Hannibal's legendary crossing of the Alps in 218 BC, where he relied on the strength and endurance of 34 African elephants. Even more impressively, the colossal structures of Angkor Wat in the 12th century AD owe their existence to these mighty beasts. But let's shift gears a bit and delve into a darker, lesser-known aspect of our relationship with elephants. Beyond their roles as religious symbols, war machines, and labor force, elephants were also deployed as executioners. Yes, you heard that right. Executioners. This might seem unimaginable today, but execution by elephant was a reality in certain societies of the past. This form of capital punishment, known as gunga rao, was occasionally used in the Western world. The Roman historian Quintus Rufus Curtius, in his Historiae Alexandri Magni, provides a chilling account of such an execution. He writes of 30 men charged with following Malaga in a rebellion, being thrown before elephants and trampled to death. A ghastly spectacle indeed. However, this method of execution was not commonly used in the West. Instead, it found more frequent application in South and Southeast Asia, particularly in India. The grim popularity of this form of capital punishment persisted into the 19th century, only waning with the increasing British presence in India. So, how exactly did societies utilize these creatures for such a grim task? Stay tuned as we delve deeper into this macabre yet fascinating chapter of human-elephant interaction in the next scene. Execution by elephants wasn't a common sight in the Western world, but it did happen. Take, for instance, a tale from the annals of Roman history. As recorded in the Historiae Alexandri Magni, the Roman historian Quintus Rufus Curtius wrote about Perdiccas, a leader who, after seizing power, chose to execute about 30 of his opponents by casting them before elephants. This horrific spectacle was performed in full view of the entire army, illustrating the gruesome might of these magnificent creatures turned executioners. The condemned were trampled to death, a chilling demonstration of power and control. It's crucial to note, nonetheless, that such instances were more the exception than the rule in the Western world. The stark reality of this brutal method of capital punishment was far more prevalent elsewhere. However, the real prevalence of this practice was seen not in the West, but in South and Southeast Asia. In South and Southeast Asia, particularly in India, execution by elephant was a widely used form of capital punishment. This grim method, known locally as gunga rao, was a common sight from the Middle Ages well into the 19th century. The terrifying spectacle of watching a person meet their end under the towering weight of an elephant served not only as a death sentence, but also as a stark deterrent to potential lawbreakers. This wasn't a penal system that was hastily implemented or randomly chosen. No, it was a deeply entrenched part of the judicial machinery, reflecting the society's intricate power dynamics and the ruler's absolute authority. The victims of such executions were often those who dared to challenge the throne, commit theft, or evade taxes. This brutal practice was a chilling message to the masses, a clear statement of the ruler's power and the consequences of defiance. As we move into the 19th century, we see a shift in the tides. The British, with their growing presence in India, brought with them their own laws and systems of punishment. The spectacle of death by elephant didn't align with their judicial values, and they began to phase out its practice. The British resistance to this form of punishment, coupled with their increasing control over the Indian subcontinent, led to a gradual decline in the use of elephants as executioners. This marked a critical turning point in the region's history, as centuries-old practices were replaced with new systems and values. However, the decline of elephant executions didn't erase their historical significance or the reasons behind their use. The choice of elephants for this grueling task was no random decision. Elephants were revered creatures, symbols of power and wisdom, and their involvement in the execution process was a deliberate move to amplify the gravity of the punishment. This method of execution was a testament to the elephant's strength and intelligence. But more than that, it was a chilling display of the ruler's absolute power and control. Elephants were not chosen merely for their strength, but for their intelligence and trainability. In this gory form of capital punishment, execution by elephant, the choice of the creature was not random. It was a deliberate decision rooted in the unique traits of elephants. Unlike other wild animals, elephants possess a high degree of intelligence and are highly trainable. This made them ideal for the grim task of executing humans. The methods through which these executions were carried out varied. The most common method was crushing, where an elephant was commanded to crush the condemned under its massive weight. This was a swift and brutal end, often carried out in public for maximum deterrent effect. But the horror didn't stop there. In some instances, elephants were trained to prolong the suffering of the condemned as a form of psychological torture. They were taught to break a criminal's limbs before ending his suffering by crushing his skull. A chilling testament to both the versatility of this method of execution and the grim creativity of those who administered it. But perhaps the most gruesome method was the one described by François Bernier, a French traveler who witnessed an execution by elephant in Delhi during the reign of the Mughals. According to Bernier, the elephants were trained to slice criminals to pieces with pointed blades fitted to their tusks. The sheer brutality of this method is a stark reminder of the lengths to which rulers would go to instill fear and maintain control. The use of elephants in this manner was not just about the execution itself. It was a symbolic display of power. The ability to command such a powerful creature was a clear demonstration of the ruler's control over the forces of nature. It sent a clear message to the populace about the extent of the ruler's power and the fate that awaited those who dared to defy them. In this way, the elephant, a creature revered in many cultures for its strength and wisdom, was turned into a tool of fear and oppression. This method of execution was not confined to India alone. Several other Asian countries also practiced execution by elephant, each with its unique twist. This method wasn't solely confined to the vast expanse of India, but it echoed throughout the continent, finding its place in the annals of history. One such country was Sri Lanka. Much like India, Sri Lanka exploited the elephant's intelligence and brute force to carry out capital punishment. However, the execution methods varied significantly. The elephants in Sri Lanka were trained differently. Instead of trampling the condemned underfoot, they were taught to throw the victims into the air and then catch them with their tusks, resulting in a gruesome end. This method showcased not only the raw power of these majestic beasts, but also their uncanny precision and control. Moving further east, we find another example in Vietnam. The Vietnamese too adopted this brutal method of execution, but with a more theatrical approach. The convicts were tied up and placed in bamboo cages, which were then crushed under the elephant's enormous weight. This public display of punishment served as a chilling reminder of the consequences of crossing the law. In Thailand, execution by elephant took a slightly different form. The elephants were trained to kneel on the convicts, applying their colossal weight slowly and steadily until the life was squeezed out of the unfortunate individuals. This method, while less violent on the surface, was no less terrifying or painful. Heading west to Persia, now modern-day Iran, we find yet another variant of this practice. The elephants were trained to place their foot on the convict's head, applying pressure until the skull was crushed. This method was as much a display of power as it was a form of punishment. Execution by elephant, a practice both horrifying and intriguing, is a stark reminder of the many ways power and fear have been used throughout history. The use of elephants as executioners paints a grim picture of our past. These majestic creatures, revered in some cultures and harnessed for their strength and intelligence in others, were also utilized in a much more sinister role. The methods of execution varied from crushing victims underfoot to slicing them with blades attached to tusks, illustrating not only the ingenuity of humans but also their capacity for cruelty. Execution by elephant was particularly prevalent in South and Southeast Asia, especially in India, where it continued into the 19th century. In the Western world, it was less common, but not unheard of. The reasons for using elephants ranged from their intelligence and trainability to the symbolic demonstration of a ruler's dominion over the forces of nature. While we marvel at the intelligence and power of these magnificent creatures today, we must remember the darker chapters of their history alongside humans.